I always knew my mother-in-law didn't like me. She tolerated me, smiled politely when my husband was around, asked how I was doing in front of others. But there was no warmth behind her eyes, just calculation, coldness, judgment. When I was first introduced to her, she sized me up like I was competition, not family. Bruno, my husband, told me that was just her way, that she was quiet, old-fashioned, protective. I wanted to believe that, but everything changed the day our son was born. I had been in labor for over 14 hours. It was exhausting, painful, overwhelming. But when I held him in my arms for the first time, I forgot all of that. He was perfect, soft curls, big brown eyes, and a deep, beautiful tone to his skin that stood out, different from mine and from Bruno's, but still, ours. I didn't think twice about it until she walked into the hospital room. She stepped in slowly, as if entering sacred ground. Her hands were clasped. Her smile was wide, too wide. But the moment her eyes landed on the baby, everything changed. Her face froze. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't say, "Congratulations." She didn't say, "Let me see my grandson." She said in a flat, trembling voice, "That baby, he's not from our family." The room fell into silence. Bruno looked at her, startled, and said, "Mom, what the hell are you talking about?" She didn't answer right away. She took a step back, looked at me with an icy stare, then whispered, "He's too dark. That child, he can't be yours, not with our skin." I was still in my hospital gown, holding my baby, body aching, heart racing. And this woman, this grandmother, was planting seeds of betrayal right there, in front of my husband, in front of our child, on the day I was supposed to feel joy. She left the room claiming she needed air, but what she really wanted was to let those words sink in, and they did. That night, Bruno was quiet. He held the baby, yes. He smiled. But something was different. His eyes were distant, thoughtful, suspicious, and I knew exactly what was happening. She had succeeded in making him doubt me. He didn't say it out loud, but I could see it. The crack in his faith, the silent question behind every glance. Was it true? Could I have? No, never. But she didn't need proof. She just needed him to wonder. The next day, she returned to the hospital. Same smile, new tone. "I just want what's best for you, son. I'm not accusing anyone, but you know our family. That baby doesn't look like us. I'm just saying, be careful. You need to know the truth." That's all it took. Just concern, just questions, just enough to make me the outsider, to make me guilty until proven innocent. And the worst part? Bruno didn't defend me. He didn't push back. He didn't tell her to stop. He just let it hang in the air. I spent the rest of my hospital stay pretending I was fine, smiling, feeding, recovering. But inside, I was bleeding, because I knew this wasn't about a baby. This was about control, power, and a secret she didn't want uncovered. And in that hospital bed, with pain in my body and fire in my chest, I made myself a promise. If she wants to play with lies, then we're going to let the truth speak louder, and I will not be quiet. After we got home from the hospital, things didn't get better. They got worse. My mother-in-law, Donna Naidi, no longer hid her disapproval. She didn't whisper doubts anymore. She spoke openly, like she had been validated, like Bruno's silence was her permission to escalate. She came over the very next day, uninvited, and held her purse like a shield. She didn't even look at the baby. She sat on the edge of the sofa, crossed her arms, and said, "I hope you've thought long and hard about what you've done." I asked, "What exactly are you accusing me of?" She looked at me as if I were filth beneath her shoes. "You know very well what I mean. That child is not one of us. And if you had any decency, you'd admit it before dragging this family name through the mud." That's when I realized this wasn't just about racism. This was about her image, her legacy, her obsession with pretending everything in her family was perfect. Bruno walked into the room, just in time to hear the end of her sentence. I thought maybe, finally, he'd tell her to stop, but instead, he froze. She turned to him and added, "Do a test, Bruno. That's all I'm saying. Prove her loyalty. If you trust her so much, you have nothing to fear." The cowardice of it made me sick. She didn't need proof. She wanted spectacle. She wanted me humiliated, cornered, exposed, even if I was innocent. And worst of all, Bruno didn't say no. He didn't say yes either. He just stood there, silent, weighing loyalty to truth against loyalty to blood. That night, he barely touched me, barely looked at our son. And as I nursed our baby, I cried quietly. Not because I was guilty, but because I was already condemned by the person who should have defended me first. But I wasn't going to sit and wait for her poison to spread any further. The next day, I went to her house. I didn't knock politely. I rang the bell like a war drum. She opened the door, surprised, but not afraid. "I came to tell you something," I said. She crossed her arms. "So, you're ready to confess?" I smiled. "No, I'm ready to end this." I told her we were getting a DNA test, not because she had the right to demand it, but because I had the right to shut her up once and for all. She smirked. "Oh, good. Then we'll see who's really dirty in this house." The way she said it, it felt like a trap, like she knew something I didn't. And then she added, "Be careful, Carita. When you dig too deep, you might find more than you bargained for." I left that house trembling, not from fear, from rage. She didn't want justice. She wanted destruction. She didn't care about Bruno or the baby. She just couldn't stand the idea that I had taken her place in his life, and worse, that I had given him something she no longer controlled, a family of his own. Later that night, I told Bruno I was going through with the test, with or without him. He looked torn, but he nodded. If that's what it takes to put this to rest, fine. But I knew it wouldn't put it to rest. Not for her. Because she wasn't afraid the baby wasn't his. She was afraid of what the test might uncover about her, and I was about to find out why. When Bruno agreed to the DNA test, I thought the worst part was behind us. I thought once the truth was in front of him, written in black and white, everything would return to normal. He would see that I had never lied, that our son was his, that I was the only one in this situation who had told the truth from the beginning. But I was wrong. Because the damage had already been done. The day after we scheduled the test, Bruno became a different man. Not cold, not aggressive, just distant, like someone living in his own head, chasing doubts that didn't belong to him. He would hold our baby awkwardly, almost like he was afraid to get attached. He barely spoke during meals. He didn't laugh at the shows we used to love. When I asked what was wrong, he always gave the same answer. "I just need to be sure." But I wasn't the one he was trying to be sure of. He was trying to be sure of what his mother told him to believe. She had gotten into his head, not with rage, not with threats, but with guilt. If you raise a child that isn't yours, you'll look like a fool. What if she's using you just to cover up a mistake? What would your father say? Those were the words she'd planted, one by one, like seeds in dry soil. And now, I was watching them grow into walls between us. He didn't accuse me outright, but his silence spoke louder than any insult. One night, I walked into the living room and found him scrolling through baby photos on his phone, old ones of himself as a newborn. Then he looked at our son, sleeping peacefully in his crib, and he whispered, almost to himself, "He doesn't look like me at all." My heart broke, not because of the comment, but because of the way he said it, with pain, with hesitation, with doubt. And suddenly, I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at the poison his mother had fed him since he was a child. She had raised him to never question her. She had taught him that loyalty to her meant distrusting everyone else, including the woman he married. I tried to talk to him. I told him I loved him. I reminded him of all the years, all the moments, all the trust we'd built. But it was like speaking to a man underwater. He could hear me, but nothing truly reached him, because she was louder than me now, even in her absence. And she didn't stop. A few days later, she showed up unannounced, holding a photo in her hand. It was a picture of Bruno's grandfather, a man I'd never met. She shoved it at me and said, "See, this is what the men in this family look like. You can't fake blood." I didn't say a word. I just closed the door in her face. But Bruno saw it happen, and instead of asking if I was okay, he asked me, "Why are you so afraid of her questions?" That was the moment I knew. Even if the DNA test came back in my favor, which I knew it would, our relationship had already been fractured. Not because of what I did, but because of what he let her do. And still, deep down, I kept hoping the truth would fix what lies had broken. But what I didn't know yet was that this test wasn't just going to reveal who the father was. It was going to uncover a secret she had buried for 30 years, a secret far darker than anything she had accused me of. The DNA test was scheduled for a Friday morning. I had barely slept the night before, not because I feared the result, but because I feared what would happen after it. What if he didn't believe it? What if even with the truth in front of him, she still found a way to twist it? Bruno was quiet on the way to the clinic. He held our baby in the back seat, cradling him gently but without emotion. I sat in silence, watching his profile from the passenger seat, a man I used to know so well, now covered in layers of doubt I didn't put there. We walked into the clinic, signed the papers, and gave our samples. 10 minutes. That's how long it took to do something that would determine the rest of our lives. When we got back home, I went to lay the baby down for a nap. Bruno stayed in the kitchen, staring into nothing. I could feel him slipping again. And I was right. That evening, I overheard him on the phone with her. His voice was low, tense. I wasn't trying to listen, but his words pierced through the wall. Yes, we did it. No, I don't know how I feel. I just need to be sure, okay? Then her voice through the phone, loud and clear, like a curse. Bruno, listen to me. If that baby is dark, he's not one of us. That's the truth. Blood doesn't lie. I froze in place. Blood doesn't lie? That phrase kept echoing in my mind, not because of what it meant for me, but because of something I had heard months ago. One time, during a family gathering, Bruno's aunt had joked that he looked nothing like his father. She laughed and said, "He's all needs side, huh?" And his mother quickly changed the subject. At the time, it seemed harmless. But now, after weeks of accusations, guilt, and silence, the memory hit me differently. What if she was hiding something? What if all this, all her rage, all her obsession, all her accusations, wasn't about me? What if it was about her? That night, I called Bruno's aunt. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a hint, maybe a word, maybe confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. She picked up and sounded surprised to hear from me. We made small talk, and then I asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" She hesitated. I continued, "Has anyone ever questioned who Bruno's father really is?" Silence. Then, a sigh. "Listen," she said, "that's not my place to talk about, but let's just say, your mother-in-law wasn't always as holy as she pretends to be." My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She lowered her voice. "There were rumors about a man she used to see before Bruno was born. A guy from her old job. Black guy. Very close to her. They said it ended badly, and then, boom, she turned up pregnant. But she married your father-in-law like nothing happened. I felt like the floor had vanished under me. She had hidden a betrayal for over 30 years, and now she was accusing me of the very thing she had done. That's why she hated me. That's why she couldn't stand my child. Because he exposed something she buried a long time ago, and she couldn't bear to face it. I didn't tell Bruno right away. I wanted the DNA results first. I wanted proof before I brought the real storm. But in that moment, everything clicked. She wasn't disgusted by my son's skin. She was terrified of seeing herself reflected in him. I couldn't sleep that night. Everything I had just heard from Bruno's aunt kept looping in my mind, like a ghost whispering truth in the middle of a storm of lies. My mother-in-law, the same woman who had accused me of being unfaithful, had been hiding a betrayal of her own for 3 decades. A betrayal that, unlike the one she projected onto me, was real. But how do you bring that kind of truth to light? How do you tell your husband that the woman he trusted above all others, his own mother, had lied to him about something so fundamental, like his own blood? The next morning, I watched him change our baby's diaper. He was quiet again, gentle but absent. I could see it in his eyes, the war inside him. He was still waiting on that test result, but he was already preparing for the worst. He still thought I might have lied. And I was watching a man suffer for a crime he didn't even understand was committed against him. I decided not to wait. I asked him to sit with me. He hesitated, but agreed. We sat on the couch. The baby was asleep in his crib. I took a deep breath and said, "I need to tell you something. and I need you to hear all of it before you react." He nodded, slowly. So I told him what his aunt had said. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't accuse. I just laid it out like puzzle pieces he'd never thought to assemble. I mentioned the rumors, the man from her job, the pregnancy that just happened, the marriage that came out of nowhere, and most importantly, how desperately she had buried it all. At first, he didn't say anything. Then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard from him, he asked, "You think I'm not my father's son?" And I answered, "I think she's terrified that you're not, and that's why she can't stand our baby. Because he looks like someone she tried to erase from history." His hands trembled in his lap, and then came the rage. Not loud, but deep. A slow-burning fury that sat behind his eyes like a volcano waiting to erupt. He stood up, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. I didn't follow him. Some truths you need to face alone. Hours passed. When he came out, he looked at me with eyes full of grief. Not at me, not even at her, but at everything he never questioned. I spent my whole life thinking my family was simple. My mom, my dad, me. He let out a dry, bitter laugh. And now I don't even know if my name means anything. I reached for his hand. It does. You are who you are. That doesn't change. But you need to know. Your mother isn't who she pretended to be. He nodded. And then he said something that shook me more than anything she had ever said. If this is true, then she's hated our baby, not because of what he is, but because of what he reminds her of. Exactly. It wasn't about my loyalty. It was about her guilt. The very thing she accused me of, infidelity, shame, dishonor, was the very thing she had committed and hidden. But I wasn't done. I told him that if he really wanted to know the truth, we could go further. A second DNA test. Not for our child, but for him. Compare his DNA with his supposed father's. Confirm, once and for all, what his mother refused to admit. He looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm scared of what I'll find." And I said, "I was scared too, but the truth set me free. It's time you stop being her prisoner." Because that's what he was, not a son, not a man, a prisoner of her secret. And it was time to break the chains. The irony of it all was unbearable. For weeks, I had lived under the weight of accusations. My mother-in-law had treated me like a criminal, shaming me, poisoning my husband's mind, whispering lies into every corner of our lives. And yet, the real traitor had been wearing the mask of a saint the whole time. After Bruno agreed to take a DNA test with his supposed father, the air in our house changed. It wasn't lighter, it was heavier. Like a storm was about to break, and none of us could stop it. The appointment was set for the following Wednesday. 3 days. 3 days of pretending things were normal. 3 days of Bruno quietly watching his father, wondering, for the first time in his life, if the man who raised him had any biological connection to him at all. And he started noticing things, little things. His father had light eyes. Bruno's were deep brown. His father had thin, straight hair. Bruno's hair had always been thick and curled in humidity. And then there were the photos, old family albums, where he noticed something no one had dared say out loud. I don't look like either of them. And he didn't. But he had spent his entire life under a spell, one carefully cast by the woman who insisted on protecting her family name, until that spell began to crack. 2 nights before the DNA test, Bruno confronted her. He didn't tell me he was going to do it. He just got in his car and drove to her house. Later, he told me how it happened. She opened the door with her usual theatrical sigh. "Finally decided to stop listening to that girl?" she said. But he didn't let her control the narrative this time. He walked inside, stood in the living room where he grew up, and asked one question. "Who is my father?" She froze. No smirk, no sarcasm, just pure, paralyzing silence. "Bruno," she started, but he cut her off. "Don't lie to me. I'm doing the DNA test. You have one chance to tell me the truth before it tells me for you." She sat down, shaking, and for the first time in his life, she looked small, and then she spoke. "There was a man before I married your father. It was quick, stupid. I was young. I thought it wouldn't matter." He asked, "Was he black?" She hesitated, then nodded. "He was a mistake. I married your father right after. I thought if I kept quiet, no one would ever know. Bruno said he just stood there, frozen. He told me his whole childhood rewound in front of his eyes. The glances, the gossip, the silence. And all this time, he said to her, you accused my wife of doing exactly what you did. She had the audacity to cry, to say, I did it for you, to give you a good life, a name, a future. But it wasn't for him, it was for her. She didn't want the shame, she didn't want the whispers. She didn't want to be that woman in a conservative neighborhood, raising a child alone, born from a man who didn't fit the mold. And so she buried the truth, deep beneath years of manipulation, guilt, and control. And now that truth was clawing its way to the surface. Bruno walked out of that house without another word. When he got home, he didn't speak. He just walked into our baby's room and picked him up, held him close. Then he looked at me and said, she doesn't get to define us anymore. It wasn't just about me being innocent. It was about him being free, from the lies, from the guilt, from the woman who had kept him in emotional captivity his entire life. We still had to do the test. We wanted the paper proof. But in that moment, the result didn't matter anymore. The truth had already spoken, and it had a new voice now, one she could no longer silence. You'd think that after being exposed, after finally facing the truth she buried for 3 decades, she'd back down. But not her. Not Donna Nady. A woman like her doesn't surrender. She rewrites the story to survive inside it. The day after Bruno confronted her, she showed up at our house, uninvited as always. But this time, she came holding something that sent a chill down my spine. A photo album. Bruno opened the door and stood there in silence. I was just behind him, holding our baby, unsure whether to turn back or face her. She smiled, that same polished, poisoned smile. I just want to talk, she said. Just 5 minutes, please. Bruno let her in. I stayed near the hallway, watching every move. She placed the album on the table like it was evidence in a courtroom. She sat down, opened it, and began flipping pages. You see this? She said, pointing to a baby photo of Bruno. That's you. That's your father's nose. Look at that smile, just like his. Bruno didn't respond. She kept flipping, page after page. Memories turned into weapons. I raised you with love. Everything I did was for you. I couldn't let you grow up without a name, without a future. I did what any mother would do. Her voice cracked, part guilt, part performance. And then she looked at him with tears forming. But I never wanted this. I never wanted us to be torn apart like this. I stepped forward. No, you just wanted me torn apart, for something you did. She turned to me slowly, eyes narrowing. You wouldn't understand. You didn't live what I lived. You didn't have to hide to survive. I nodded. No, I didn't, because I didn't lie, and I didn't accuse an innocent woman of something you did. She stood up. Her hands were shaking. You turned him against me. He was my son, my only child. Bruno stepped between us. I'm still your son, but I'm not your soldier anymore. Her face twisted, pain, pride, and panic fighting behind her expression. She tried one last move. She walked over to our baby, asleep in the crib nearby. She looked down at him, and for the first time, something changed in her face. Not acceptance, but something close to grief. He has your eyes, she whispered, and his hair. It's just like mine when I was a girl. It was like she was trying to convince herself. Bruno walked over, gently picked up the baby, and turned to her. He's mine, and he deserves better than secrets and shame. She stepped back. Tears finally fell. Real ones, maybe, but it was too late. Don't shut me out, Bruno. I'm still your mother. He held the baby close. You'll always be my mother. But I can't let you poison this family the way you poisoned our past. And then he said something I'll never forget. If you want to be in his life, it has to start with truth. Real truth. No more lies. No more games. She said nothing, just picked up the album, hugged it to her chest, and walked out. The door closed behind her with the weight of 30 years crashing down. And for the first time since our son was born, there was peace in the house. No whispers, no suspicions, just truth. It was bruised and painful, but it was finally ours. The DNA results would arrive in 2 days, but in that moment, we didn't need them. The truth had already taken root, and it was stronger than her lies. The envelope arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. It was thick, sealed tightly, with 2 names printed on the front, Bruno and his father, or rather, the man he had called Dad his entire life. We didn't open it right away. Bruno stared at it like it was a time bomb, and in a way, it was. He sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of him for hours. I didn't pressure him. I just made tea, changed our baby, tried to keep the house warm while the storm outside cracked the sky. Finally, he looked up and said, "Will you sit with me?" I did. He took a deep breath, ran his fingers across the seal, and tore it open. There were 3 pages. He skipped the jargon, the official formatting, and went straight to the conclusion. And then, silence. No gasp, no tears, just stillness, until he slowly lowered the paper and whispered, "I knew it." I leaned in. The result was conclusive. A 0.00% chance of paternity. The man he had believed to be his father, the man who raised him, taught him to ride a bike, came to his school plays, was not his biological father. The truth was undeniable. And suddenly, every strange look, every hushed comment, every awkward silence from his childhood made sense. He folded the paper gently, almost respectfully, as if even a painful truth deserved to be handled with care. Then he looked at me. "We need to show her." I nodded. He didn't want revenge. He wanted closure. We drove to her house in silence. She opened the door, surprised to see both of us. Her eyes went straight to the envelope in his hand. She stepped back without a word and let us in. He sat down, placed the results on the table, and slid them toward her. "Read it." She didn't want to, but she did. Her hands trembled. Her lips pressed tight. Her eyes scanned the final page, and then the color drained from her face. There it was. 30 years of secrets, shattered in black and white. She looked up at Bruno, her mouth opening slightly, maybe to deny it, maybe to cry, maybe to spin another lie. But he stopped her with one sentence. "Don't say anything. There's nothing left to defend." She looked at me next, like I was the last person she could blame. But I just stood there, calm, strong, holding our son in my arms, the child she had accused, rejected, insulted. Bruno walked over and kissed our son on the forehead. "You're everything I wanted." Everything she tried to make me fear. And that was it. No screaming, no dramatic exit, just truth, standing taller than shame. She sat in silence, clutching the envelope, her hands pale and shaking, and we walked away, together. As we left her house, the rain had stopped. Bruno looked at me and smiled, a soft, tired smile. Not because everything was fixed, but because everything was finally real. We went home and laid our son in his crib, and for the first time since he was born, there were no doubts, no whispers, no suspicion, only truth and peace. She may have spent years trying to destroy me, but in the end, she destroyed her own illusion, and all that was left was a family built on truth, stronger than any lie she ever told.